Pledge of Allegiance, Councilmember McCollum.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Larkey,
Here.
Councilmember White,
Here.
Councilmember Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Bryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft,
Here.
Councilmember McCallum,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
We have a quorum. Personal appearances. Number 1, Cynthia Randazzo. State your name and address for the record, please.
Cynthia Randazzo, work address 2316 East Meyer Boulevard, Kansas City, Missouri 64132.
Do you need that lowered down?
This lowered?
Yeah.
No, I think I'm good. I am short, but I think I'm okay if
We
you
got
can
a
hear
guy
me.
for that.
We've got a guy back there.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight to present, thank the mayor, the council members, and also the city staff. I also want to thank the leadership of the organization that's with me tonight in the back of the room. There are officers and some of our leaders of our organization. But I'm here tonight to share some information with you about our nonprofit organization, who we serve, and economic development with our new building, and then to make a request to waive permit fees for this new building. So our Cass County Dental Clinic is a safety net clinic located here in Belton, right down the street, 802 East Walnut. And last year we served 1,247 children at this site, and those were children with a Belton, Missouri zip code. And so this number has continued to increase since we opened the first and only safety net clinic in Belton in 2011. We are called a safety net clinic since we take care of a population that's underserved. We realize that the city currently only waives permit fees for the Belton School District and I believe the library, but we believe we're a part of serving the same children that the Belton schools serve. In addition to our dental clinic site, we serve students, really 3 additional programs that I wanted to just briefly talk about. We currently go into the Belton schools and conduct teledentistry for any family that's unable to come to our clinic down the street. We haul our mobile equipment in, we set up, and we serve these kids to make sure that they are not missing school due to dental pain. And so teledentistry is everything that we're doing in the clinic. We're doing x-rays, exams, we are doing cleanings, and then also fluoride varnish. Although we're reimbursed by Medicaid for those that are insured by Medicaid, the cost for the children that we serve in the Belton School District that are uninsured, there is no reimbursement for that. We also partner with with the Belton schools pre-K through 6th grade. We're in every one of those schools doing screenings each year. So during the most recent school year, we screened 2,045 students, and we provided varnish application on 1,448 of those students. And those require parental consent. So the families are very engaged with this program. So what was important about these screenings is 413 of the kids that were screened needed either early care or immediate care. So early care would be kids that have cavities. Urgent care would be kids that have abscess that were identified during these screenings. And again, with this one, there's no reimbursement at all for the dental screening programs that we do. Our final thing that we do with the Belton schools is we provide scholarships to any of the high school seniors that are going to be studying any area of health and or nursing. And certainly those that are studying nursing, we will support them up to 4 years for them to get their nursing degree. Want to move over to economic development a little bit and talk about that as it relates to our building. I shared earlier that we served 1,247 children with Belton zip codes, but we served almost 1,900 additional children at this Belton site that had a different Cass County zip code or a surrounding zip code. So they're coming from Peculiar, Harrisonville, Pleasant Hill, Grandview, Lee Summit, Kansas City, to name just a few, and then certainly further south, Garden City, Creighton, and cities like that. We know that our foundation and our clinic do not produce any tax revenue for the city by serving this population of children. But we are bringing other families to Belton, and they are shopping and they're conducting business, and those families are generating tax revenue for the city. The previous year, we had almost 1,800 that came from other cities, and we are looking at building a 5,800 square foot building and moving from 4 operatories to 8 operatories. So that's additional families that would be coming into Belton to spend, shop, go to Quick Trip, get groceries, et cetera. Our general contractor will also be using subcontractors with addresses in Belton, and other subcontractors will have employees that live in Belton. We also believe by starting our building in this area, it could encourage others to purchase land from the developer, and I believe there's an additional 10 acres that's available. So you might be asking yourself, if they can afford to build this building, why are they asking to waive the permit fees? So we are currently raising funds for our shortfall for this building project, and so waiving these permit fees can help assist us in reaching our fundraising goal needed to finish the cost of this building. Certainly, going from 4 operatories to 8, we're doubling the cost of our equipment and other, also the square footage of our building. Our main funding source is Medicaid, and then grants and donations that come from the community. And any additional revenue that we do receive, our organization, our board
In 5
invests
minutes.
those funds back into our programs. I mentioned earlier that there's no funding for dentists, teledentistry, screenings, and/or our scholarship program. So I want to thank you for your time this evening, and I'm just asking you to please consider making this an agenda item for your next council meeting to discuss and vote. Is that possible?
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Would now be an okay time to motion for those fees?
This could be a time when you do that, as we've discussed previously. Whenever any motion is made, this would not be a final action because it is not on the agenda. It would instead be a motion directing city staff to prepare all necessary documentation for a motion to consider waiving the fees to be placed on the next agenda. So no final action will be taken tonight because it is not on the agenda as that.
Okay, do we need a motion to request staff to do that?
If that is a motion you would like to make, it could be a motion. I'm sorry, just looking at Andrea so I don't get too far ahead. A motion directing city staff to prepare all necessary documents to place a waiver of permit fees for Cass County Community Health Foundation on the agenda of the Belton City Council on March 12th, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I have a question. How much does your organization have in this so far as land purchase and building materials, things like that?
We're short about $700,000 right now, and that's what we're currently raising. And this would be one way to support that shortfall that we're working on, and we have others that we're working on for that as well.
And so you have how much saved up so far?
We have close to $3.6 million that's available.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mayor, I was just curious, what are the fees? How many of them are there, and what is the total of the fees? I don't know.
You want?
I mean, we can get you a rough estimate now. We could prepare it all as part of the documentation if we wanted to, if you decided to move forward, to actually have an actionable item for next agenda.
Can you give us a rough idea?
You know, 50-ish, maybe more than 50,000.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 2, David Christie, Christie Development.
Appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. Been working here in the community a long time, and
Hey, state your name and address for the record.
David Christie, 14600 Linden, Leawood, Kansas. We are completing now the renovation of and leasing the Price Chopper Center that we bought from John Constantino. You will notice that we have done several pad deals. We've generally filled up the center. We're about to open the other place in the development. We're excited about what's going on there. I'm working with the user for the Phase 2 land, which was part of the original TIF. The reason I'm here tonight is we have, can I see the plan possibly? Can we put it on the? Okay, I'm sorry. The copy you have in front of you, we have a very small pad there. We could not put the other place on that pad because it's only 3/4 of an acre. So what we're trying to accomplish is to fully build that out. So we're trying to get a Valvoline ground lease approved. Valvoline does on average $2 million a year, and they think it's such a strong market because of their store on the east side over on Belray Road that they want a second store here. We're also, if you all are familiar with Swig, Texas Tea, it's a drink place where you drive through and get soft drinks and so on, and they do an average of $1.2 million. So we could add $3.2 million worth of sales revenue plus the property taxes to this development. This would be the only pad that we would have left other than the Phase 2 land. We're excited about it. It's been great. And you asked me why we're working with Valvoline. Well, first of all, I own the Popeyes, and I can't do a chicken place because there's an exclusive. So I think you all know that chicken places have been going everywhere on every corner, and you know that's been a good use. So Popeyes is precluding that, and I think we have enough coffee places in the community with the resurgence of 2 or 3 that have come in quickly to Belton, and they're doing well and thriving. So basically, there's not a bunch of retailers that are pursuing sites. You guys know, I think, and understand that I own the Gateway, where Marshalls and not Target, but you know. Ross and all that stuff is, and we have very little activity on those pads, and we are working hard on them. You know, those pads are paid for. I've been busting my chops to try to get retailers there. The previous administration asked me not to do fast food, which I have not done, which I don't think we need more fast food. So anyway, but we're trying to finish what the city generally asks us to do is fix the Price Chopper project because it had floundered for 7 years. And we think we're at the final stages of doing that. Several years ago, you all amended the TIF plan to permit a battery store and a Firestone, a tire store and that type of thing for service automotive. Obviously, a Valvoline is less intense than that type of use. So you've previously done it for other retailers in that district. Mr. Constantino is supporting this, and we feel like it's a good use for this property. It's only a 2,200-foot building. Because the pad's so small, we're just trying to accommodate that particular use. The other place is going to open up the middle of April, and we're excited about that, and I think everybody in the community is excited about that. So anyway, I'm just asking for you to amend the TIF plan to permit Valvoline to go in there and build a new store. They'll spend $1.5 million on the building, so the property taxes will be substantial, and it'll help the TIF. And of course, the TIF paid for Y Highway, and bonds are sold, and we're excited about getting those bonds reduced and paid off. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I don't know if there's anything that you guys can do relative to that, as far as doing motions and stuff like that. But we would like to move forward with this project and the SWIG project. So if you'd give us your blessing, we'd like to move forward.
Any questions? I got one, and I think I know the answer, but when you said Mr. Cosentino's on board, he still owns the grocery store, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought.
I own everything else but the,
I just want to make sure. Okay.
yes.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Has Valvoline done some market research studies? I know that we just had a couple of other like oil change places put in Belton. Is there still enough space for them to make money in that location as well?
Yes, ma'am. They've been very bullish on the market, and they're only putting another store in Belton because the store that's there is slammed. And they're doing higher than, their national average is over $2 million. So they're doing more volume than they do on a national average. And so, I think they feel like that, being in a anchor center like the Price Chopper project and all the traffic and everything that's going on there and all the developments that's going across the street and the new apartments and what we built with Old Navy. We're getting ready to start construction on Bath and Body on the building next to Old Navy. So they're getting ready. We're getting ready to come in for permits on that. So we're excited about that. But you guys have been great to work with. I'd like to finish what I started, and I think Valvoline would be a good addition. And because there's only so many uses that are being pursued by these retailers at this time, we need to get this thing moving, get the TIF paid off, and move down the road. Mr. Constantino and I are owed money at the rear of the retirement of the bonds to get some of the money back we invested in the project. So I'd like to, that's one of the reasons that I'm working hard to fill it, and make it successful.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
So what happens to these types of buildings with our federal government pushing electric cars and there's no oil to change on them?
I'm not sure.
I mean, they're pushing electric cars like crazy, so, eventually there will be no oil to change. Then what do we do? So.
I'm not sure that, I've heard this, an electric car, weighs 8,000 or 9,000 pounds, and our infrastructure is not suitable, these bridges and everything that we have. So that could be a super big problem, but I don't have the answer to that. But I'm sure they'll evolve and do something else.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'd recommend to the council is if this is a path we want to pursue, at least having the conversation, why don't we workshop this?
Yeah.
We'll put it on the very next
That
agenda.
sounds
We
good.
can do a
Yeah.
workshop. We can have as much data as you would like us to present, at least that we can find, and have the conversation there as to potentially put it on an agenda in the future for an ordinance if that was where you wanted to go.
Sounds good. I was going to suggest that. Go ahead.
I represent Ward 4, and Ward 4 wasn't necessarily excited about the one going in front of Apple Valley, and I'm not sure how they're going to feel about another one, but I've been to the one in front of Apple Valley, and it's a nice place. So, but Ward 4 doesn't necessarily. They express themselves quite well sometimes. I'm just sharing that.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
F, new business. Number 1, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-08.
An ordinance authorizing acceptance of an allocation of funds and execution of a grant agreement with the Missouri Department of Transportation, Division of Highway Safety for a total of $27,800.
Present. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Police chief?
Sorry about that. The mic was on, but it wasn't working. We're asking for a second read on this because MoDOT puts us up on a timeline by the time they issue the grants, by the time that they need the turnaround in Jeff City so we can act upon the grants. There's several of these grants allow us the latitude to do a lot of the enforcement action that you have brought to our attention, whether it be red light violations or speeding in neighborhoods or other things like pedestrian crosswalk violations. And so we're already making plans behind the scenes to use this to affect those types of traffic issues that we see on a regular basis that would help us do that outside of our normal patrol shifts. These would be special shifts where overtime would be paid.
Expired temp tags?
Yes, we're looking at a number of those programs that you've seen on the local media.
Any questions? Go ahead.
And so just from what I read in the packet, it sounds like it's no cost to us, right?
No, this is no cost to us. It is grant monies. It's paid out or reimbursed to us. We pay out the overtime on the front side. It's reimbursed by the state up to that amount which we are granted.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
Louder.
Any discussion on the motion for a second reading? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2024-08.
An ordinance authorizing acceptance of an allocation of funds and execution of a grant agreement with the Missouri Department of Transportation, Division of Highway Safety, for a total of $27,800.
Present.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
Kraft,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
McCallum,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Motion carries. 2, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-09.
An ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for a 4-lot commercial development, Cass County Sheriff's Office Complex, near the southwest corner of East 155th Street and North Scott Avenue in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present.
Second?
We have a motion and a second.
Yep, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before this evening is a request for approval of a preliminary development plan for the Cass County Sheriff's Office Complex. This plan covers approximately 7.6 acres, which is generally located at the southwest corner of North Scott Avenue and 155th Street, and will include 4 commercial lots and a shared tract for access and detention. The development plan includes a 9,900 square foot sheriff's annex facility, a group living facility, and 2 commercial pad sites adjacent to 155th Street for a restaurant and a hotel. Currently, group living facilities are not permitted in the C2 zoning district. However, staff is also bringing forward a set of code amendments this evening that would permit them with a special use permit. If those code amendments are approved, a special use permit for a group living facility must be approved prior to or concurrently with the final development plan. The development plan does meet all UDC requirements with the exception of a modification requested to the restaurant setback from 30 feet to 12 feet along the primary shared access drive. That setback is subject to change based on the final development plan as we currently do not know the restaurant tenant. Staff has noted the large amount of parking provided for the Sheriff's Annex facility with 197 spaces proposed, which is more than 6 times the required minimum under the code. Staff does recommend a reduction of 20% with the final development plan or a parking analysis provided to justify the large amount of parking over that minimum requirement. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 6th at which no one spoke in opposition to the project. However, one adjacent property owner did have some concerns regarding the proposed hotel and wanted to ensure that it would be well maintained. Currently, there are no hotel or restaurant tenants identified for this project. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the development plan and approved a preliminary plat. Staff also recommends approval of the project with 4 conditions that are included in the staff report and in the ordinance. If there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff requests a double read to allow the county to be able to proceed with the submittal of a final plat and a final development plan.
I guess I have a question based on the parking situation you were just explaining. If we do a double read, I'm assuming we won't have an answer on that particular piece then.
So we conditioned that to be provided along with a final development plan once they submit formal site plans for the annex along with architecture details and the landscape plan.
Go ahead.
We do still have our hotel rating system. Is that correct? So that way it would still be managed the same way our other ones are. They would get a ranking. So if it fell below standards, it would be taken care of. Correct?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Anybody? Go ahead.
Well, page 34 has this sentence. The connection over the railroad will require the access utility easement to be recorded separately in partnership with the railroad to secure the second point of access to the rear portion of the site prior to the submittal of the final plat and development plan. Full disclosure, I'm on the volunteer railroad board, so I have these questions, and if anybody thinks I'm going out of line, just slap me and I'll stop. But the proposed access road that is in their, not in this, didn't mention it in this plan, but in their emails to our board is a 4-foot high pile of dirt burying the track and effectively preventing train travel on this section of the railroad. So my first question is, why do they even need this additional access road, since they existed for 50 years with access only to County Line Road?
We are adding 4 properties, including the Sheriff's Annex, which does need 2 points of access, as well as the group living facility for safety reasons. That the access is something that the county is going to have to work out with the railroad on what that design looks like.
Well, I mean, if you go to any crossing here in Belton, you don't go 4 feet over it, you go right over the tracks. So I don't exactly know the reason why they, except for geology, I guess, or the conditions of the slopes, but I don't exactly know why there's no flat railroad crossing like you would normally have, as opposed to basically shutting down the railroad in that area. So is there a way we can, I mean, there are other options. They can immediately go across the railroad like a normal grade crossing, make a right, make a left, and go to where they're going. There's several different designs. They could also just simply cut into the hillside and take the 4 foot down instead of building 4 foot up and go across. It's kind of scary that the next time we see this, it'll be, and I won't even be here, but that there will be a final development plan and nobody here will even know that this stuff is going on. Is there a way to make a condition that it be a normal railroad crossing without the 4 foot of dirt?
So this is a preliminary development plan, so it does not have that level of detail yet, and that's why we have conditioned all that with this, is that final design needs to be designed with the final development plan and final plat.
I mean, they have details to the extent that they've got where the garbage bins are going to be and all that kind of stuff. So but they didn't mention this at all. I mean, they didn't. I mean, it's like they're trying to push it through with that.
Well,
and there has. I mean, maybe the railroad can just, or the railroad board can just say, no, we're not going to give you an easement. But I think that with them being the minor player in this between Belton and them and the county, they're probably going to be overpowered. Yes.
Yeah, I would again just note that the way that it is written, it conditions it all on a partnership between the railroad and Cass County in figuring out how that easement works. There is nothing that obligates the railroad to allow for the Cass County Sheriff's Office to do whatever they want over railroad property. They cannot technically condemn it either. Railroad property is for a public purpose. So at this point, what we're seeing here is a preliminary development plan that has a condition that says that the applicant has to work with the property owner who they need to get an agreement with to provide for that secondary access. The railroad board can decide what that access looks like, how it functions. If it doesn't want to grant its approval, it doesn't have to grant its approval.
Okay. Well, as some of you know, we don't even have the money to hire lawyers, but I agree that it does, by this sentence here, it does say they want to be in a partnership. And usually in a partnership, you sit down and talk. They just said, this is what we're going to do. So but I agree legally, I hope I agree legally that we'll at least have a chance to, the railroad board would have a chance to say no, or as we already have, suggest alternative routes.
I would recommend, Mr. Mayor, that the city not interject itself in setting any parameters on this agreement at this point, and just try to allow the two entities to work it out with it amongst themselves. And I also understand that the county's been trying to get the railroad to speak with them. They've reached out to try and open that line of communication, and it's been very slow to respond. So,
well, we did email back over the weekend, so it's we are in discussion with them now. So anyway, it's not helped by the fact that when they cleared the land, they damaged 500 feet of our track, which nobody is paying us back for. So that's another expense that the railroad has that keeps us from, again, hiring high-priced lawyers. But I agree with what our legal counsel said. It's between and what our city manager said is between us and the sheriff's office and their designer. So.
Go ahead.
In your beginning, you talked about the next item on the agenda. So if that item on the agenda for some reason doesn't get through, how does it affect this item?
Then the preliminary development plan would be approved, but they would not be able to proceed with a final development plan for the group living facility. They would have to find another location for that and another use for that lot.
And do you know how finalized they are with that group living situation?
It's been announced for a number of months to go on this location. We have not seen any design plans for it yet.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Just to something Councilmember Powell said there, I want to make sure I understood. The final plat will still come in front of us, correct?
The final plat comes before council. The final development plan only comes before the planning commission.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. You want to abstain on that too?
Oh. No, I'll let you have a second.
All right. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2024-09.
An ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for a 4-lot commercial development, Cass County Sheriff's Office Complex, near the southwest corner of East 155th Street and North Scott Avenue in the city of Belton, Missouri.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Lawson.
Aye.
Goff.
Aye.
Powell.
Abstain?
Richardson.
Aye.
Bryan.
Aye.
McCallum.
Aye.
Kraft.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion carries. 3, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2024-10.
An ordinance amending Unified Development Code Sections 1-5, 40-1, 40-3, 40-4, and 18 related to group living, Section 22-10 related to screening, and Section 40-4 related to marijuana facility buffers.
Present. Second.
We have a motion and a second. You're up again.
Before this evening is a set of UDC text amendments related to group living, screening, and marijuana buffers. The group living amendments include modifications to several sections of the code, including definitions, table of uses, special uses, uses subject to conditions, and the North Scott corridor overlay, to better define group living land uses based on current terminology and standards. Redline versions of the changes are attached to the ordinance for reference to see what changes have been proposed. In the definition section, staff is proposing to remove foster home from the code, as this does not need to be a standalone use, as the city does not regulate foster care, and there are no specific conditions or zoning requirements that need to be followed, other than being located in a permitted residential dwelling unit. Staff is also proposing to remove the term and definition of nursing care facility, as it can be combined with a residential care facility definition. The long definition that's currently in the code is being more concisely written. Staff is also proposing to remove the conditions that have been incorporated into the definition of group home, as those should be included in the uses subject to conditions section in 40-3. Staff is proposing to expand upon the definition of group living not otherwise classified, and to change the term halfway house to transitional living, and update the definition to be more in line with current terminology and standards. For the land use table, modifications to the definitions will be applied to the table. Based on reviewing the code as well as other codes in the metro, staff believes that the intent of the code was that the group living not otherwise classified use should be group home, as they are generally acceptable in all residential zoning districts with conditions. The group living otherwise not classified use should only be permitted in more intensive multifamily residential zoning districts, as well as limited commercial zoning districts. And the purpose for that is that those facilities are generally larger scale with multiple unrelated individuals or families living in shared spaces. Therefore, staff is proposing that group living be permitted with a special use permit in R3, R3A, PR, PO, and C2 zoning districts. The special use permit will allow the Planning Commission and Council to determine if the specific type of facility, the location, and operations are appropriate for the specific site requested. The land use table in the North Scott corridor is also being updated to match those same standards that match the citywide land use table. This change would allow the group living facility in the C2 zoning district as previously proposed on the Sheriff's Annex site, subject to future special use permit approval. In the special uses section 40-3, there are terminology updates and some rearranging of conditions of the standards, but the intent remains the same for transitional living facilities. Special use requirements are being added for group living not otherwise classified, which carries the same standard of similar facilities, which requires a distance of 1,500 feet from any other group living facility and compatibility with neighborhood character. For the uses subject to conditions in section 40-4, staff has removed any separation requirement for assisted living and residential care facilities, with the only condition being that those facilities have primary access off of arterial or collector streets. Staff does not believe that a separation distance between assisted living and residential care facilities are necessary, as the potential negative impacts from them are very limited. Staff has modified the conditions for group homes to a separation of 1,500 feet to match the other group living facilities, as well as the same neighborhood compatibility condition. The second set of conditions is related to screening in section 22-10. Staff is proposing to clarify acceptable methods for roof-mounted, building-mounted, and ground-mounted equipment. All roof-mounted equipment must be screened with a parapet or other design feature that is compatible with the building at a minimum of the same height of the mechanical unit measured at the roof surface. Currently, that standard is not clear. Building-mounted and ground-mounted equipment must be screened with compatible architectural treatments, which could be fences and walls or evergreen landscaping. Staff does believe that those code amendments will improve the overall aesthetics of new developments going forward. The last code amendment is related to marijuana facility buffers in section 40-4, which is currently set at 1,000 feet from any school, church, or daycare. Staff has provided buffer maps for 1,000 feet, 750 feet, and 500 feet in the packet. All of those are the distances from schools, daycares, and churches. And staff is proposing a 500-foot buffer. That separation does allow additional opportunities for facilities to locate or expand in the city, and primarily impacts churches and daycares that are already located along commercial corridors. Schools are least likely to be impacted by the change because most schools in Belton are in residential areas. The reduction to 500 feet mostly significantly opens up additional locations on the east side of I-49, which is currently limited. It also opens up several blocks of downtown, which is currently prohibited due to the location of several churches around the periphery of Main Street. This 500-foot separation does match Raymore and is more restrictive than Liberty and North Kansas City, which both have 300-foot buffers. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on February 6th, at which no one spoke on the group living or screening changes. However, a representative of a potential dispensary spoke in favor of the 500-foot reduction, which would allow them to consider additional options, particularly on the east side of I-49. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the proposed text amendments, and staff also recommends approval. If there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff does request a double read to allow the code amendments to take effect, as there are code amendments have pending related development activities to them. I will also note there is a typo on the second page of the ordinance, page 45 of the packet, for the definition of residential care facility. That has been corrected from car to care.
Any more?
That's it. A lot
Any
to get
questions?
through.
Go ahead.
So if we disagree with one part of this, we can just change the one part. It doesn't necessarily have to. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, if we begin changing parts of this that are also wrapped up into other sections, and we start changing the full intent of the ordinance, it would have to go back. So for example, if you want to change just the marijuana facility buffer stuff, okay. If we start going word through the group home things and begin changing some of the other portions and significant revisions, then that would have to go back to the Planning Commission.
Go ahead.
Under group home, you have single-family dwellings, but I also know group homes that are not in single-family dwellings. They are in buildings. So, and part of that is based upon definition at the state level of what they're licensed at. So how do we come to terms with someone that wants to do a group home, but is defined here as single-family dwelling, serving as 8 or less?
So you mean group homes are a single unit, but they don't have to be in a single-family home. They could be in an apartment or a townhouse or anything like that.
Or a larger building that's not classified as a home.
I would also note that that definition directly comes from state law. You have to allow for group homes of 8 people or less in single-family residential.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying you don't, but I'm asking, where does it fit if they're opening a group home that's larger than 8 and?
So then that gets into the group living not otherwise classified.
Okay.
This
Which
change
would
would
be-
allow us to regulate that better than what it is now.
Okay, I'm just clarifying things. I'm not.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I do want to talk just briefly, I guess, about the marijuana distance, because last time I had asked about alcohol sales and the buffer related to that, and I was told it was 100 foot per the state law, but not city law. And I just wanted to kind of explain, so I'm in agreement with 500 foot, I'll vote yes on this. Just wanted to explain where I was going, especially since Ward 1 is probably most impacted, as you mentioned. I'm thinking about it similarly to alcohol, but the big difference here being we have state legalized marijuana, but not federally legalized. So I feel like a bigger buffer than 100 feet makes sense, but obviously maybe not as restrictive as 1,000. So I just wanted to explain the thought process going through that. I'm comfortable with the 500 feet.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
And you said none of the schools would affect this, but what about Scott School? Isn't it within 1,000 feet of Main Street, or?
So he said they were least likely to be affected
Oh,
by it.
okay, sorry. I missed that.
There are only 2 schools that, if it's reduced to 500, that would be in close, within, where they have commercial within those schools. There's a tiny sliver of the commercial center in Cherry Hill that would be within 500 feet of the high school boundaries. And then Scott would be very close, but I don't believe the only site there, I think, that would be dragged in is the actual where Cass County Dental is currently located on Walnut.
And backing up a second, what's the rationale for this? Is this to get more marijuana in Belton, or is it for more sales tax, or is it that we think our students are rational consumers and they can handle this? Or, I mean, I know there's got to be 21, but we know that there's teenage drinking, so I'm sure there's teenage marijuana use going on. I don't want to sound like a prude, but
some of it is we've been approached by other potential dispensary users or operators, and there are very limited sites elsewhere in the city that are already looked at on the north and North Scott corridors, and particularly the east side of I-49. That is the area where there are a number of commercially zoned properties that do not have opportunity to be considered with churches and daycares that are in commercial zoning corridors.
we have 3. How many are in Cass County total? Do you think? I heard there was 1 in Harrisonville and 1 in Pleasant Hill. Is that?
And there's 1 in Raymore.
One in Raymore, too.
I don't have a count
Okay.
for all of Cass County.
I would also, just to jump in, so dispensaries are broken up via congressional district. And if you think about where you guys are, you are on the border of one congressional district from the next, with one congressional district being more kind of densely populated and having a more active potential base of users than other portions of your congressional district. So that's why you guys have so many right along here.
Okay.
And that if you look in the Northland, it's the exact same way.
Okay.
So your guys' congressional district stretches to Columbia, I believe.
Probably.
But so a lot of that space in between Columbia and here is not an area where one of these businesses could survive. So instead they locate, and I've talked to these site selectors, they locate and try and find sites close to 2 boundaries of 2 congressional districts, and then locate them there so that they can get users from both congressional districts.
Okay. Well, commenting on Councilmember McCallum's, I've looked that up too, and it is a city ordinance too, 100 feet for alcohol, not just state. But the fact that we don't know as much about marijuana, we don't even know how to detect that a driver is under the influence of marijuana. I guess going from 100 to 500 is maybe sufficient conservatism. So I'm okay with that. I had another question about the screening. Does this apply to residential?
This applies to multifamily, commercial, and industrial.
Okay, because, and maybe I can discuss this offline with you, but on page 50 of the, no, I'm sorry, in section 22.6 of our UDC, there's a table, and it's unclear if you're using the abscissa or the ordinate to figure out where you are as opposed to where your neighbor is when you're talking about screening for things like this. I assume that table applies to this. If it doesn't,
Yes,
then
we
it does.
we are aware that entire chapter will need to be rewritten as part of the UDC update.
Okay.
It has not been
Okay,
updated in quite a while.
But right now, maybe you could tell me is the I'll just say the horizontal line, is that where your zoning is, or is that where the proposed incoming, in this case,
Trying to picture the table in my head, I believe that the column is the property, the more intensive zoning. So
okay.
residential doesn't need to buffer against a commercial, but a commercial needs to put in a buffer against a residential.
Okay, so if I know that, then I can go in and find a cell and figure it out. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kraft.
Do we know, does the school district have a position on if we were to move it to 500 for the marijuana dispensaries?
We have not specifically engaged them on that question.
There's been no discussion of that matter at the school board. Go ahead.
One of the reasons is for increased sales tax. How much currently the three that we have generate sales tax?
We are estimating that about $12 million a year industry retail-wise in with the three dispensaries that we have now combined. And so, yes, there is potential that another one coming in could increase that number, which would mean more sales tax revenue for everybody who has who benefits from sales tax revenue, and in addition to the extra 3% that the city also benefits from. So yes, there is a financial benefit potentially to more as long as the market is growing and not just a reshuffling of the market.
And just so everybody's clear, both at home and here, there will not be any kind of new facility licenses granted for about the next 18 months. We are getting micro dispensary licenses through, and then after micro dispensaries, that's when it becomes the availability for DHSS to issue actual new licenses. All that's occurring right now are micro business and relocations under certain conditions. So you're not seeing, it's not all of a sudden going to be a flood. There's also caps statewide on how many facilities can be located within each congressional district.
Go ahead.
I'm personally against this, but.
Go ahead.
All right, I'm a little confused by that statement because didn't we at the Planning Commission have someone come forward that was looking at a site specifically?
Yes, and they could be a relocation or they could be a micro business.
Okay.
There is some discussion of potential relocation or change in the landscape of the current retailers.
Anybody else?
Well, I'm not a parent, but you're a good representative from the school board. What do you think their take would be if marijuana facilities were allowed closer to schools?
That's a good question. I don't have an issue with it. I would hate to guess what the rest of them would say.
Okay.
I mean, I know I don't have an issue with it. Okay. Alcohol can be within 100 feet of a school. So.
Well, I noticed, and I forget where it was, that there was in another city there was no problem even taking maybe it was Kansas City, I don't know, taking the limit for churches and daycares down to 300 because obviously. Well, not obviously, but maybe church-going people and kids under 5 years old wouldn't be going there after church or after school. But I think the concern is more for, particularly teenagers. And again, you have to be 21, but there's a lot written in the Missouri statutes about not buying stuff for teenagers and things like that. So it is a known problem I'm sure we have teenagers right now using marijuana illegally. So.
Anybody else? You said what was the need for the second reading?
Just for potential on the screening, as well as the group living facility. But, I mean, there's no heartburn if there's not a second reading on that tonight.
Anybody else?
Just quick question.
Go ahead.
At 500, how many more could build versus 750?
Well, there's not an exact number. It's just the potential land area that is opened up for that. As Patrick mentioned, there's still a cap on the number of licenses, so there's not going to be a significant increase in the number with that reduction.
And also under the Missouri Constitution and how you have to measure, like these maps are really good and illustrative, but they are not the map. There is no way to show where exactly they can go, even under the 1,000-foot, 700, 500, whatever, because it's as you can legally travel by foot. So there is, and I made this point when that was put into DHS's rules on behalf of MOCAN the first time, makes it so that it's basically impossible for us to sit here and answer that question. No person can know until one of them picks a spot, and then you have to back in. But again, there are caps. There are not going to be a flood of businesses. There really can't be. So,
For 18 months.
well, I mean, the cap stays around for forever.
Okay.
So unless all of a sudden every single medical and comprehensive facility from your congressional district moved here, there'd be 48. That's the absolute maximum cap, is 48. But then also that would never happen because DHSS is required to spread them out throughout the congressional district to allow access to medical marijuana to patients.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion for a second reading. Oh, that's somebody else.
Motion for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Motion approving the second reading of Bill 2024-10.
An ordinance amending Unified Development Code Sections 1-5, 40-1, 40-3, 40-4, and 18 related to group living, Section 22-10 related to screening, and Section 40-4 related to marijuana facility buffers. Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Goff,
Aye.
Pryan,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
McCallum,
Aye.
Lawson. Aye. Powell,
Aye.
Kraft.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I know, me too.
For motion approving resolution 2024-24.
A resolution approving an agreement with Brown & Brown for property and liability consulting and other similar services. Present.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. You're up.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and council members. This is an agreement with Brown & Brown. If you'll recall, we did enter into an agreement with them in February of 2023 for health insurance benefit services. And with that, council approved it. We've moved forward. We're very happy with their performance, with the diligence that they went out and got different items from the market for us. And with this, we want to extend and add a new agreement for consultant services relative to property and liability coverage. Currently, we have property and liability through Midwest Public Risk, and we've had that coverage since 1983 or 1984. To my understanding, we haven't gone out and looked at those prices to make sure that they are in the best interest of the city. So essentially, the fee for that request is $10,000 to do the due diligence. The agreement's been reviewed by the attorney, and the recommendation is to approve moving forward with that.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, the reason that number 4, number 5, this item and the next item are on the agenda, they're related essentially, is that, first of all, you guys have to approve, contracts necessary. But the reason that we put this on this instead of as a consent agenda item, because it's a small contract, it's only $10,000, is that we want to be 100% transparent that we are circumventing our normal purchasing policies in this instance because we're using a known entity that we have a very strong relationship with, that we are very pleased with their performance. You'll recall that when we went out to bid on our health benefits package, we saved a considerable amount of money on the broker side of it and helped turn that into a 0% increase for staff in our budget that you're going to be seeing presented here shortly. And so that's why we have this as an agenda item standalone, is we are circumventing that agreement, which you all are able to give us the approval to do so. And any time that the staff sees the need or potential need for us to circumvent any existing policies that are set by the council, we believe it's in our best interest to bring it to the council for formal approval.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Since you brought up that they're related, I was going to wait for the second one, but my only question is, I noticed they're priced exactly the same. I I'm assuming the services are slightly different, so I thought it was a little strange they were priced the same, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, so I was hoping you could talk to me.
No, they are different, and that's why there are two separate documents, because property liability is based on the assets and things like that, and the work comp, which is the next, cyber security, are on claims. And so with that, the pricing is essentially that our prices are very, very similar in the cost and the amounts that we pay toward NPR currently. And so I think it's just a similar service with similar lines of or claims from the city of Belton, and that's probably why they're priced similarly.
Okay.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 5, motion approving resolution 2024-25.
A resolution approving an agreement with Brown & Brown for workers' compensation insurance and cybersecurity insurance, consulting, and other similar services.
Present.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda, 1 motion not available to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Communication from council, Councilmember Goff.
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Only thing I was going to bring up and point out, if you just wanted to share with everybody, is absentee voting has officially opened for the Belton municipal election. So if you're unable to attend in person on April 2nd for your vote and you want to make sure your vote gets counted, get out there and vote.
I got nothing.
I got a lot of park stuff to update and just kind of brag about. The cardboard boat race on Saturday was such a hit. I believe they had 15 participants, and the indoor pool area was packed. The stands and folks standing around. They had really neat trophies made by a staff member, and I'm just really excited to see this kind of unique, fun, and fresh programming for Belton. Along those lines, there's a reimagined summer event coming up. It'll be called Carry Nation Days, and I believe it's May 31st through June 2nd. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. That's right. Okay. Cleveland Lake, the Dryden Land Edition plans have been presented, and it is such a gem with such a dynamic use of all the space and a lot of community assets that residents are going to love, but I think will be a draw for the community. So that's been really exciting. And then just some upcoming stuff. The Easter egg hunt is March 23rd. Even if you don't have small kids, if you like chaos, go out and see that. It's a lot of fun. The Spring Craft Fair will be April 20th, and the car cruises are coming back April 27th. So very, very busy time at parks, and that's not even talking about spring sports or high blue programming. So just giving them a shout out.
I got a question for you real quick, Allison.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I lost my train of thought. Shoot, what was the first thing you brought up on parks?
Cardboard boat races.
Okay, what was the second thing?
The Dryden edition. At
Oh yeah,
Cleveland
that's
Lake.
what it was. The Dryden. When will we get to see that?
Brian, were you planning to come show council or?
Oh, sorry, Brian. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but when will we get to see that?
I'll talk to City Manager Joe. Will probably be the first or the second meeting in April. We've got a couple other presentations that we're bringing to council on the 27th meeting. So it'll be, unless you want to come to a park board meeting in March, they're coming to present it to the park board in March, so.
Well, maybe I will. I'm pretty excited about that too. So.
And that's the public too. If you're watching at home and you're interested in that, park board meetings are open and posted just like these, and you can get the early scoop on things like this if you attend.
And we wouldn't have to listen to you.
That's great. Yeah, that's a good point.
Go ahead.
That was mean. I have nothing.
Angela?
The only thing I have is I wanted to say everyone who is going up for election in April in council, we had a 101 council course. That was so extremely helpful. I really wish it was something that we would have had before I was sat. And I love that each and every person attended it. So anyone that gets voted for will have already been through the 101 course and have an idea of what it's going to be like sitting in this seat. So I really appreciate the city putting that on.
I'll second your praise for that.
I'll third it.
Fourth it.
Oh, okay.
You're up.
Oh, I don't have a fifth, but literally. Anyway, last week the Transportation Development District did meet, and we approved the cooperative agreement with Belton, which will eventually come in front of the city council to be approved. And if you've driven down Mullen Road, you see they've started the expansion this week. So that's all I have.
You're up.
We will be having a Ward 4 meeting later in March, and that will be Mr. Powell's last one. And we'll be inviting the two individuals that are running in Ward 4 to speak, so I would encourage all citizens, if they want to come and listen, to come. And we will get the date out soon.
That's what I was going to ask you what date it is.
Soon.
All right. You got a great audience now. You can tell them the date. All right. I don't have anything. City manager, you have anything?
Just let the public know that we did take the legislative policy and meet with our state elected representatives, Representative Davis and Senator Bratton, and gave them our policies and had a brief conversation with each of them on some of our priorities. And I would love to say I hope it does some good. And I'll leave it at that. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
What? That's all you have? All right. Items for review and discussion. You are up.
Mr. Mayor and Council, you thought the first part of the meeting took a while. I'm just joking. All right.
You got 5 minutes.
I love that idea. Let's see. This is the FY25 City Manager's recommended budget. As I get into this, I want to remind everybody that might be watching and everybody who's here that this is the kind of the near culmination of a process, right? We started the process in the fall with holding ward meetings and getting some information on what the priorities are from the residents of our community. We went through a couple of budgeting workshops, did a workshop on essentially priority setting, had a workshop on capital improvement, had a workshop on all of our operations. And so what you're going to see here is kind of that culmination of all of that information we've been gathering during those workshops and the conversations we've been having and putting into a near final budget format. Okay, so the hope is that you take this, if there are any, and I'm going to say this twice, I'm going to say it first right now. If you want changes to this budget, it's not the final thing yet. Yes, we did submit some numbers for formal publication, but until you guys approve it, there's nothing final. And I would say that if you do have some adjustments you want made to this or some changes, I'm asking nicely that you get those back to me by Monday, or get those requests into me by Monday so we can put it into the formal budget presentation when we have the first reading for the budget, which will take place at the very next council meeting, which is on, I believe, March 12th. So with that said, here's our quick overview of what I'm proposing tonight. This is kind of our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about council priorities, budget assumptions, an overview of funds, general fund stuff, revenues, expenditures, and capital. We'll talk parks, economic development, streets, debt service, major capital, wastewater, solid wastewater, golf, other minor funds, TIFs, and sales tax funds. And some of these we're going to be very quick and high level. If at any point you want to have a conversation about any of this stuff, now is a very appropriate time to do so. That's the hope, is that now we get these final things ironed out, so that way when we come back on March 12th, it's the formal process of us getting this approved. So I'll move forward. Council budget priorities. You'll recall that there are three things that kind of rose to the top of the list during our prioritization and what the needs were at the ward level: sidewalks, water bills, and single-family housing.
and those priorities are in action at this point. We did a sidewalk study that Greg presented a few months back, kind of outlining what the need was as far as where sidewalks are, where they're not, where the sidewalks that exist might have some need for repair, what that price tag might be, and that led us obviously down the path of the use tax, putting that back on the ballot and allocating the way the ballot language is written, half of that revenue would go towards sidewalks and sidewalk infrastructure. And so if that does get approved by the voters in April, then obviously the next step will be a prioritization plan on how we start with that process. Okay, we'll take that study that was already done and we'll create an actual action plan for that. And it will involve some, requesting of federal funding and grant applications and things like that to try and make our local dollars stretch. But we think we have a pretty good plan in place preliminarily, and so the next steps will be, of course, prioritizing what goes where, when, and how quickly. So water sewer expenses are increasing, and that leads us to the second part. The second one of those, we're projecting a 5% increase in our water and sewer rates as far as what we pay to those other folks that we buy our water from, and those that we pay for sewer service. Yes, we have our own sewer system, but that's only for a portion of the community. The rest of the community is part of the Little Blue District, and so we do pay a rate to the Little Blue to utilize that. And so even though those are increasing to us, we're not passing those along to the end user. This budget does not have any pass forward of any of those increased expenses. We're essentially taking we're using existing fund balances and strong funds right now to, continue to eat away at those balances and give that relief to the end consumer and not have them take that on. Everybody's utility rates are going up across the board. You'll see electric, gas, and so ours are not. Our water and our sewer, from last year, residents didn't have to pay for an increase. We did pass along an increase for commercial. This year, we're asking for no increase across the board for commercial or residential for water or sewer rates. And so, again, the use tax is on the ballot, and the hope is that gets passed. We're going to be passing along a rebate that folks will see on their bill every month of, anywhere from $12 to more dollars a month, depending on how much revenue is generated. So that's an estimate. Housing updates. We've talked about housing a lot the last 18 months, and we've even talked at this level about doing some things to make our processes more development friendly. We've talked about trying to cut times down for plot plans and things like that to try and make it to where developers will want to come to Belton to try and do some things. And we are having some success. Second Street, we did that RFP process for the Second Street, and there was a big public meeting about that last week. And so we have a proposal for more housing downtown. We've got our housing starts are way up so far in 2024. Our overall permits for February, and this is residential and commercial, so I don't want to overstate the residential side of it. I believe we're at about 100 permits for February, which is extremely high. I believe it's going to be the highest month that we've had since July of 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And we've got over 50 of those permits are for single-family residential housing. And so we are seeing some strong growth on that front as well. In addition, we have had developers reach out to us in the last 2 months, really since the first of the year, for at least 3 major residential single-family opportunities that they're potentially pursuing. Now, that's still early in the process. We don't, and it'd be ahead of the game to try and announce where those might be in our community. But we are seeing there are 3 different areas in the community that we're seeing some action on from single-family residential developers. So I think we're seeing some fruits to our labor here of trying to be more development friendly. And so those are the 3 biggest priorities, obviously, and we're putting those in action for the residents. So now let's move forward to our assumptions for FY 2025, and we talked about this, I believe, during the operations workshop. We're assuming a 2.5% COLA, 2.5% step for merit and tenure. Those are the raises that we're asking for you all to approve for staff for this year. We are not going to have an increase in health insurance premiums, and that was part of the agreement that we worked out that Brown & Brown helped us work out when we got this new contract with Aetna. 3% estimated growth in sales tax revenues. That's where we are. We've seen some extreme growth for a few years, 10, 12%. We're going to be super conservative this year. We think super conservative by saying that we think that could come down to 3%. I think there's a decent chance it stays above that, but we want to make sure that we are ahead of that game, that we want to underestimate revenues, not overestimate revenues, because that's how you get in trouble. 5% estimated increase in water costs from KCMO. I talked about that. 5% for Little Blue Sewer District. Talked about that. We are budgeting for a 15% estimated increase in liability insurance. Liability insurance is going up everywhere rapidly, and we don't think we're going to be immune from that. You just approved something that is going to help us kind of pursue all of our options and avenues when it comes to property and liability coverage. So hopefully that'll help us mitigate that some. But from the preliminary discussions we're hearing from those folks in the space, the businesses that provide that service, yeah, we're not optimistic. So 15% is what we built into our budget. And then, of course, the loggers increases, which are set at that level. So you guys have a packet of papers in front of you. The first few slides I'm going to go through here, you don't have that in your packet, but when we get deeper in, you will have all those. You can kind of follow along if you choose to. It's up to you. I'm not going to go line by line, but that information is there for you in case you want to look at it. This is our budget total for all funds. Our general fund, we're looking pretty healthy right now, and I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves on that. But right now, if this budget were approved, we're projecting a fund balance of about 28.83% for the general fund at the end of FY25. Public safety sales tax, all of our fund balances are pretty healthy. You'll see parks has brought theirs quite a bit down, and I think that's, we'll talk about parks here in a little bit. Street funds, we go forward, park sales tax, there's that. We've got general obligation bond, major city construction, street capital projects, stormwater projects. We got wastewater in there, water, solid waste, and the golf course, and you're seeing really healthy fund balances across the board. Total of all funds, 35.46%. We are in a very healthy financial environment right now. I'm going to warn you that number could make you think, okay, well, why don't we do something extra here? Or why don't we take, why don't we give some relief over there? And I just want to make sure that that we are careful when we go down that path, because a downturn in the economy and a downturn in sales tax revenue really negatively impacts us in a lot of funds, a lot of areas. And so it'd be better for us to be conservative in a time where we're not sure that the bull market's going to continue, if that makes any sense. So let's start with the general fund. General fund revenues come from essentially these sources: sales tax, property tax, utilities, franchise fees, intergovernmental transfers, grants, so to speak, service fees and charges, ambulance fees, fire protection, court fines, those types of fees. Overhead allocations, those are the things that happen between funds. Talk about the water fund, the wastewater funds, and what be it. General fund revenue. Here's an overview of the general fund right now. FY25, we're looking at a $26 million in revenue is what we're estimating, and that's including that 3% increase in sales tax that we're budgeting for. And then on the expense side, and you guys should have this data in front of you, I believe. If you go down to the total expenses, we're at 26.56. And so it's about a $500,000 deficit. We do have the strong fund balance you saw previously, so we feel like that's not an unreasonable deficit for us to have. We also went ahead and did include the transfer from capital to help us for that $1 million that we talked about previously. You want to say anything about that? No? Okay. So I'll just keep moving forward. You want me to slow down here and let you review these numbers, or are we good to keep moving forward? All right. And some of the capital, I don't want to go through each of the individual capital line items. We talked about that at the capital improvement, or the CIP workshop, and then we also reviewed that in the operations workshop because it's all related. And so here, here's essentially the list of the capital fund improvements that are in the general fund, the capital improvements in the general fund. that have stayed in the budget, so to speak. You'll recall we cut that back by about $1 million, from about $2 million to $1 million from initial asks. And so we're at about a total of $1.031 million in general fund capital projects for FY25. So, and I'm not going to go through it again. Again, we've already done this all workshop, so if you want me to stop, I'll stop. Parks Fund. Let's talk parks a little bit. You know, in the past we put parks at the back end of the presentation. Let's go ahead and put them up here at the front. I think it's worth pointing out to you guys. They've got a lot of projects in the works. I think that's a good thing. I think that if you look at the recent surveys that have taken place, parks are more spending on parks is something that's supported, and there's a lot of support for our parks in general. And they've kind of, they had almost 100% fund balance in the sales tax fund for themselves, and they had a healthy fund balance in the parks fund, and they've taken some of that money and they've programmed it. And so I think that's that you're going to see that here. The FY25 budget total expenses is up to over $6 million, whereas 23 actual was 3.9 and 24 budget was 4.9. You're seeing they're putting that money to use. Capital, a lot of cool projects that they've got going forward. Things that I think the community is going to be really excited about. Some of it's some maintenance stuff, but I think, some play system resurfacing, Cleveland Lake restrooms and parking lot, Markey Park sunshades, let's see, marquee sign, I think, slide renovations, you're seeing things like that. The Cleveland Country View Connection Trail, which will be really cool. Yeah, lots of cool stuff. So I'm really excited to see some of the stuff that they're proposing here. Even have some wayfinding signage in there as well, which falls in line with a project that we've got that we're doing, in our economic development / hotel motel tax that we'll see here in a little bit. So that's parks, economic development. Oh, I'll point out that here you'll see parks revenue 6.094621, parks expenses 6.094621. So they're proposing a completely balanced budget in their what they're asking for you guys to approve. So, economic development fund, got $526,000 in the budget for this year for revenue, $523,000 for expenses, and the revenue projection includes the marijuana sales tax. We are being, we think, pretty conservative in projecting those revenues, but it is going to allow us to do a few things that we maybe haven't done in the past. One of those is a customer service request tracking system. We've talked about this. We reimagined a position here on staff to almost act like a customer service ombudsman position. It's the first point of contact. It's the person who actually sits at the front here at the annex, who answers the phone calls, most of the first phone calls that come into the city that aren't utility related. And that person's going to essentially make sure that we're tracking all of our, concerns and resident requests and those types of things all the way through the process to ensure that they're getting properly resolved and that we're actually communicating on a high level what the resolutions are or where in the process those are. But that's not going to be easy for us to do. We're going to have to, we really could use a tracking system to help us do that. And so that way it helps us create that single point of contact, not only with a person, but it allows us to have the ability to do so with an online component as well. And so that's about a $30,000 expense. I know they've already done some research on some software that can do that, and it's pretty consistently, and it should be covered pretty readily with that $30,000 cost. We're excited about that. $20,000 for Arts Commission and Tourism Board strategic planning and programming. The Arts Commission is about to get up and running. I know they're in the process of trying to set their first meeting. They're working with the appointed folks on that commission to get their schedules aligned to get that meeting done. The Tourism Board has been meeting for quite a while now, and they've got some pretty cool initiatives that they could potentially move forward on. But it's always helpful for us to look at things from a 40,000-foot view and do some strategic thinking on how is best for us to serve our residents with each of those boards. So we've got somebody in there to help us do some of that. Another citizen survey, ETC citizen survey. I think it's important that we continually, every 2 to 3 years, we go back to the public and say, hey, how are we doing on each of these services? See if we can make any progress on we get a statistically valid survey. ETC is the best in the business. They're the ones that everybody utilizes in this space, and so I think that it helps us promote our transparency with the residents especially. So just to say, hey, tell us how we're doing. So if we need to improve, let's improve. And then wayfinding signage is a big one. I think that'll be a fun one for us, trying to ensure that we can identify, all of the tourism assets for people that are not only coming to our community, but even people within our community that may not know what's available to them. So having and we've done some preliminary showed you guys some preliminary concepts on what that might look like, and we're excited to get some of that in motion with our first round of signage this year. So that's economic development. Streets fund, total revenue 4.7, total expense 4.7. So it's essentially a little bit of in the red, but it's essentially a balanced budget. It's a pretty it's a healthy fund, so we're not worried about that. Some of the projects we're looking at doing this year, just some street and stormwater preservation stuff that we really need to get into. Rebuild some sidewalk across certain areas. There's that one spot that everybody can see when they drive down Y Highway, Cedar, and they see that spot where the sidewalk has kind of gone over. It's there's a MoDOT grant to help us with some of that stuff, but that's there. Ground penetrating radar for help us with some things. Dump bed truck, and then of course the dump bed truck replacement. So debt service fund. This is kind of a high level slide of our overall debt service, just so you guys can see where we are overall. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that on that a little bit more in depth in other areas, but you'll see our debt service for the approved budget, and then FY25 it's about $19-20 million. So overall, and that's a combination of debt service. Okay, it's not just one spot. Okay, major capital projects. Here you're going to see stormwater is in here essentially, sewer impact, water impact, street capital projects. You can see here's all the numbers year over year. Our budget for 25. I'm not going to go over that too much. The meat of it is the capital, is what projects we're actually doing. We've got some huge projects this year. I mean, some really, really big projects. Things we've been saving up for, so it's not like we don't have the money for them, and we're ready to go on these. Route 58 Powell is a big one. I know they just did the pre-construction meeting on that, so we can expect that to move forward here in the next month or so. They'll start that project. Larkspur and Starlight is another project. Essentially, we're trying to, as part of that almost, we're trying to connect, Powell, over to, through Larkspur. Mullen, that one's already underway, as was mentioned earlier. North Cass Parkway, that's an interesting one. I believe that's kind of for design work that would allow us to try to help make a connection for the North Cass Parkway, I believe, to Mullen, is what that would be for. Reconstruction of North Scott, you guys probably have seen all the cones already out on North Scott, and I don't know if they've actually done any digging yet or not, but I think, yep, they have. See, Greg said yes, they've already started digging. So that project is underway. And then just some regular street and curb, that's part of our normal program, that's in there. Marquee Road, this is a new one. This is a cool one. This is something that there was some extra money available through Mark that was going to be reallocated, and that had to go to projects that were ready to go. And of course, luckily our Public Works, and Greg leads that crew, they're always good about making sure our projects are lined up and ready to go, so that way the moment that funding comes available, we're ready to pounce on it. Because you'd be surprised, there are a lot of cities that had the ability to go after some of this money that was reallocated, money that had been allocated once, but then they couldn't get to in time, so they were going to lose that funding. And so essentially there was a call for new programs, and there were only 3 cities, I believe, that got any new programs, and we were one of those 3. And so that's a really cool thing for us that we were able to do that. And so what this is going to do is allow us to connect Marquee Road from 163rd all the way to North Scott. And so, but we have to get, now we have to get it done and make it happen. So we said we're ready for it, and they said, okay, here's the money, now go do it. So we have to go make sure it gets done. The RAISE grant, we talked about the RAISE grant here. We workshopped that, and I believe we've even approved that contract, or that grant application. That allows us to kind of look at what infrastructure needs are going to be down the line as we do some more economic development out along as it relates to the railroad and to street improvements to access some different parts of the city that are not developed yet. And then the North Cass project, this is essentially, I talked about the design thing, but this is essentially to extend North Cass Parkway to Mullen. We think that once that happens, then that's going to help, activate some land that's right there in that area and make it a lot more attractive for economic development. And I think it's been a long time coming since that North Cass exit was created. So, and then Hargis Gardens, there's more of that project there. So, that's kind of the meat. That's of the capital. That's the big money items, so to speak, that the city's going to be, going after this year. Wastewater fund. Wastewater fund's very, very healthy. Even so, we've got almost $12 million in revenues and $14.5 million in expenses. I talked to you guys about how our expenses are going up, and we're not passing that along to the consumers. You can see that in that number right there. Wastewater capital, we got public works facility, just a small program. The I&I program is a big one. We've kind of pushed this I&I program off, for quite a few years, at least to do a lot of work on it. And we've got $1 million setting here for us to go ahead and do that this year, and we think it's well worth it. The I&I could allow us, if we could find a way, if we can make some good progress in our I&I program, it could save us some money in the long run as far as having to spend money on stuff that's going through the sewer system that doesn't belong in the sewer system, stormwater runoff specifically. So there's Olson Acres, design and construction of sewer line there.
That's going to be reimbursed by the county, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
You have wastewater fund up there. I just want to make sure clear of that.
Yeah, it'll go through the wastewater fund, but we have to budget for it, right? And so, but the money will come on the back end. Just like those big capital projects I just showed you. A lot of those projects have a lot of grant money attached to them, and you'll see the overall cost in there because we have to budget for that to spend that money. But on the backside, we're getting some revenues to help us cover some of those costs in some pretty major ways.
To your point, were you asking about that? Because that's that
I just
DNR one that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the county is reimbursing
Yes.
for that.
Yeah, that was that DNR okay.
Yep. So some software upgrades to the finance software is in there. Valve Vault, which is Valve Vault, which is a necessary upgrade. Let's see, and then some pretty consistent stuff. Some vehicles, lift station, generator, things that are kind of routine replacement that needs to take place. So, solid waste fund. Solid waste fund is interesting. Our total revenues, 1.8 million, and you'll recall that this is kind of a pass-through, right? They're supposed to be kind of a pass-through. We have our trash and recycling services that we contract with someone, and then we put that on our bills when we send out our utility bills for the residents. And our fund's pretty strong. Total expenses 1.4 million, revenues 1.8 million. So, if you will recall, that's created us a pretty solid fund balance in that solid waste fund, which we probably will need to at some point utilize one way or another. We might need new trash bins here in the near future. Apparently, our trash bins that we purchased 4 years ago have about a 4 to 5 year life cycle, and so we're already seeing some of them fail, and so we're worried that we're going to do some more purchasing of trash bins. Otherwise, we would just go ahead and lower bills. We'd just say, hey, let's lower our trash bills. But we're looking at potential different types of bins, a little more sturdy, heavy duty. They're more expensive. Maybe we'll get more use out of it, more lifespan out of those. But we think that we are in a good position to make that purchase if we need to do so without having to pass a further increase onto the consumer. So, water fund. Again, same thing as the wastewater fund. You see our revenues, you see our expenses. We got about a $1.5, $1.6 million difference between the two, and that's again we're not passing along those increases in our expenses to our customers. So, taking advantage of healthy fund balances. Water capital, here's the water capital. Nothing super exciting in this one. A lot of just replacement stuff. Water tower maintenance is a big one, of course, but that's routine. That's stuff we should be doing anyway. That's essentially the water in a nutshell. We doing okay?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at water purchases, 2.866 million. What's that?
What we buy Kansas City, what we pay Kansas City.
Purchasing water from Kansas City.
Okay. For city use?
No.
No.
No, for, we buy our water from Kansas City and then sell it to the City of Belton citizens.
Okay. That's fees. Just making sense of it mentally
No, you're
that
fine. This is the place to ask those questions.
water sales, we take in 6.9, and then water costs are closer to 2.8.
Yeah.
That sounds accurate.
Yeah.
Because of
Well,
all
that's
the
the raw water we have to buy is about $2.8 million, but the infrastructure that we have to use to get the water to the
staff.
people, not just staff, but I mean the physical infrastructure, the pipes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The drain in your laundry room.
I paid for that today.
All right, the golf fund. Golf fund is healthy, yes?
I just wanted to say something. I mean, when you look at just some of the debt service we have too on some of the infrastructure that we have, that's a big part of that, so.
It just caught my eye because it's actually lower than I would think that we physically transfer to KCMO for the volume of water we get. I'm actually surprised at what that amount is. Like,
Okay.
what we take in for fees and stuff does make good sense to me. And also then my brain goes to how many gallons do we have brought down? You know what I mean? So that's not the conversation for tonight, but thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah, at any point, if you guys want to suggest a workshop on something that's related to something like that, we're happy to get as much info as we can. I mean, I know we have data on some of the stuff that, like, the miles of water pipe that we have to maintain and make sure is installed and those types of things. Maybe on a dry month, maybe it might be something worth looking into for the public, just so they can see what are we responsible for.
Yeah.
So, ready to move on? Golf. Golf course is killing it, guys. The golf course does a great job. This shows a bit of a deficit, but I want to point out that this year we're doing something different with our golf course that we have not done in the past. In the past, we've given money from the general fund to the golf course to help cover their debt service, right? This year, they're covering their own debt service. I think that's an important step for them to make. I think it's a great step for them to make. And so there's zero general fund dollars going to the golf course this year in this budget. Just want to point that out. So they have a deficit shown here, but that's a budget deficit. They haven't operated under a deficit yet at any point since I've been here, and probably for many years. They've been very good stewards of the money. Jay does a great job of making sure that he's looking around the area and in the market to see what rates should be. He likes to make us an affordable version. It's a public course. We want to remain available to the public. So we want to be affordable. We also want to be competitive, right? We don't want to be so affordable that we can't get on the course. And so it's almost to the point sometimes you can't get on the course because it's gotten so popular. So I know he's had a shift in kind of the way that they do business there over the years, and they've gotten away from that membership model in favor of a just straight up book your time and pay for your time model, because there's so much demand there, and the amount of high quality public courses available in Kansas City has gone down so drastically that we really have a gem here now when it comes to a high quality public course, and it's also affordable and attainable for the average golfer. All right. So I'm just proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact that we don't have to have a general fund transfer, and they're able to take that on. It just shows the growth that they've had and the responsibility that they've shown in being good stewards. This year, the main thing is asphalt paving. They did some asphalt paving this past year. We've got to do some more around the cart paths and around the clubhouse, just to make there's plenty of cart path that they need to do. It's not included all in this, but if they could do some around the clubhouse this year, and maybe have a plan for down the line on cart paths, depending on what the long-term vision is for the city. Other funds. Just kind of a review of our other funds. We have the general capital fund. Street impact fees, Marquee Parkway, some of these we don't even utilize or haven't utilized much. Mayor's Christmas tree, drug seizure, DWI, and special training. I only put these in here because they're funds that exist, and I want to make sure that we're covering everything. TIF funds, there's an overview of our TIF funds. Not a lot of work for the council to do on these funds, other than the fact that you have formal approval authority, so that's why we have it in here. And then sales tax funds, these are attached to other areas, but we wanted to just point them out to you specifically in one slide. There's the park sales tax, the capital improvement sales tax, and the public safety sales tax. And you might ask the question, why are they different? If the sales tax is the sales tax is the sales tax, why would they be taking in different amounts of revenue? Well, the public safety sales tax is the highest amount of revenue there because they are exempt from the things that we give to entice development, the incentives. Those incentives aren't taken off of those public safety sales taxes, but they're, the park sales tax, capital improvement sales tax are attached to, the incentives do impact those differently based on the incentives that are approved, and so that's why the numbers are different. Does that make sense?
To explain that a little bit, because the public safety sales tax was passed after these things were put into place.
Correct, but public safety sales tax is exempt from any of those
Exempt
incentives.
from them, yeah.
And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, but I believe that statutorily, the ability for us to do a public safety sales tax forced us to exempt them from.
So, no, not technically. There's a provision within the TIF Act that new taxes enacted post August 28th, 2014 are exempt for TIFs that were approved before then. So if you approved a TIF in 2010, never anticipated that the city would have a public safety sales tax enacted in 2019? 2018? 2018, then why should the developer be able to be reimbursed from it? Because it never went into their but-for, it never went into any of those other calculations.
Fair enough.
Now, having said that, if somebody were to come in and request a TIF now, they would be able to capture the public safety sales tax. It's just, you look back. So.
Makes sense. You'll notice we're not doing a lot of TIFs anymore anyway. There are other economic development and incentives and tools that we can utilize that have become a little bit more advantageous for us than to try to go through the TIF route. Plus, our state legislature thought it was very cool to make it more difficult for the city of Belton to do TIFs. So that is my presentation. Do you guys have any questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, will we get a copy of this, of your presentation?
I can give you a copy of the presentation, sure. Most of the data is in that booklet that we've given you, but yeah, I'll be glad to share it.
Well, yeah, this is raw data, but it doesn't say what we're spending it for. Right?
Fair enough.
Like here.
Fair enough.
And if, knock on wood, but if the use tax doesn't pass, there's nothing in there for sidewalks, right? We're hanging our whole hat on that for sidewalks.
At this point, yes.
Okay. And several meetings ago, I made a motion, which was seconded, to hire a firm to do an overhead allocation study for making it more equitable. And both the finance director and you said that it would be in the budget. So could you tell me where it is in the budget?
Where do we have that? 1 second, yes.
I think it's on the first page of your booklet. And we probably should have put it in the capital presentation, and I
And under
apologize.
revenue- It's not under revenues, though, is it? I mean, our first,
Not
well,
the
my first page
well,
says revenues.
legislative, sorry.
Oh, legislative,
Yeah.
okay. It's,
So it might be the second or third page.
I see legislative expenses, yeah.
Uh-huh. So if you look at line item 010, 1,430.20.
3020, contractual service, contractual.
Yep, there's 108,430 in there,
Mm-hmm.
and that study is in there.
Okay. Okey dokey, thank you.
Go ahead.
You did say if there was something that we were interested in, to email you.
Yep. Either email me or call me and ask me. An email would be preferable, so I have a written record of it. And I'll be glad to add it to our formal presentation, and then we can either vote to add it there or not.
Sent you two.
Okay.
Anybody else? Go ahead. You got anything?
Just word on the street is that DBMSI is not going to continue their contract for Christmas tree lights on Main, and that they would like to push that to the city, and I don't know that that's in the budget, so just calling that out.
Fair enough. That is not at this point in the budget. That is correct.
Okay. Well, disappointed people if we let that drop. I think historically what has happened is that the city would put up, Public Works would put up the lights that DBMSI bought previously. Does that sound right, Greg? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
That would have occurred before I got here, because I don't remember ever putting up lights, because
Okay.
the last 3 years or 4 years, the contractor did it.
I'm not going to solve the problem. I'm just pointing it out. Sorry.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right.
Thank you.
Item I, I'd entertain a motion to enter an executive session to discuss matters pertaining to legal actions according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.1 pertaining to the leasing, purchase, sale of real estate according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.2 and pertaining to negotiated contracts according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.12. Let the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Richardson?
Aye.
Howell?
Yes?
Pryan?
Yes.
Kraft?
Aye.
Goff?
Aye.
White?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
McCallum?
Aye.
Mayor Larkey?
Yes, motion carries.